Hello, my name's Scott Humphries. I'm the author of this book, The Age of Melodramatic Miniseries, When Glamour Ruled on Television. And I made this video to commemorate the 40th anniversary of one of the glitziest miniseries, Hollywood Wives, from 1985. There is a lot of sex, a lot of suffering, a lot of melodramatic pathos. It's got all of the big and bold 80s looks and fashions that you'd expect to see. It's quite an interesting miniseries about beautiful and rich people who never quite get what they really want. I hope that you enjoy the video.
The novel Hollywood Wives was first published in July 1983. It was author Jackie Collins' ninth book and the most commercially successful one of her career. Aaron Spelling, who bought the miniseries rights to Collins' novel, was one of the most prolific television producers of all time. His company made many hit series, including The Mod Squad, Charlie's Angels, Heart to Heart, Dynasty, The Love Boat, and Beverly Hills 90210. Aaron Spelling Productions also made theatrical films including Mr. Mom and Soap Dish, miniseries such as Danielle Steele's Crossings, and TV movies such as the Emmy Award-winning docudrama, And the Band Played On. There are some interesting differences between the book and miniseries versions of Hollywood Wives. Jackie Collins herself was not too happy with the TV version. More about that later. Collins may not have liked it, but there are many fans of this Baroque TV melodrama. With its soap opera-like storyline, big hair, heavy makeup, splendid gowns by Nolan Miller, and a very eclectic cast, the miniseries is a fantastic time capsule of everything that made the 1980s big and bold. Even the opening titles are a superb snapshot of 80s glamour, drama, and excess. A high-tempo theme song, sung by Laura Branigan, with clever lyrics about the desperate lives of rich women married to powerful men, plays over a glitzy sequence of images designed to convey sex, shopping, and suffering. It almost feels like an animated women's fashion magazine, with its highly stylized but not very subtle hyper-consumerist messaging. It's over the top, but delicious. Hollywood Wives and other melodramatic miniseries of this era, like Scruples, Rage of Angels, A Woman of Substance, Sins, and most especially Lace, were successors to the so-called women's films of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Like those films, these miniseries featured female stars, with female-centric characters and storylines, and they unapologetically addressed a primarily female audience. Also like the earlier women's films, these miniseries were often dismissed and ridiculed by the critics at the time they first aired, but they have also come to be more appreciated over time. Hollywood Wives is now recognized as a classic of its kind. Indeed, Hollywood Wives seems to be even more popular today than when it first aired in 1985, continuing to find new audiences. We can also see the influence of Hollywood Wives and other melodramatic miniseries on today's reality shows that offer a voyeuristic peek into the lives of the rich and famous, as well as in contemporary melodrama series that adopt a more ironically detached narrative tone compared to those that were made in the 1980s. Who knows? Perhaps we may even see a revival of sexy, glitzy, 1980s-style miniseries like Hollywood Wives.
Hollywood Wives will continue in a moment.
To understand where Hollywood Wives came from, we need to understand three elements of 80s mass entertainment and pop culture. First, the money, sex, and power popular novel, also known as glitz fiction, sex and shopping books, or bonkbusters. Second, the blockbuster event miniseries, which dominated TV sweeps ratings in the 70s and 80s. Third, the glamorous primetime soap operas, which topped the weekly series TV ratings in the early 1980s. Let's start with the money, sex, and power book. Before Jackie Collins, there was Harold Robbins and Jacqueline Suzanne, pioneering popular fiction writers who wrote frankly about sex, drugs, corruption, abuse, tainted love, and the dark side of fame and fortune. Grace Metalius's 1956 book Peyton Place could also be considered a forerunner to books like Hollywood Wives. Jackie Collins's first book, The World is Full of Married Men, was published in 1968. Her second novel, The Stud, was made into a successful movie in the 1970s, starring her sister Joan Collins, as was its sequel, titled The Bitch. With Hollywood Wives in 1983, Collins became one of the best-selling brand name authors of the decade, alongside writers like Danielle Steele, Sidney Sheldon, Barbara Taylor Bradford, and Judith Krantz. Krantz, whose books were also known as bonkbusters or sex and shopping books, is the author most commonly associated with Collins. Many of Krantz's novels were also made into TV miniseries. Hollywood Wives was one of many popular novels in the so-called women's fiction market that dealt frankly with female sexuality, equality, gender relations, and double standards, and showed women to be equally as ambitious, ruthless, and sexual as men. These books usually had glamorous, opulent settings and featured strong, assertive female characters who worked hard and played hard. The stories often had romantic or quasi-romantic themes, but they were also concerned with feminist ideas of women in power, independence, and taking control of their lives. These were not women who waited for men to save them, or to make the first move. They competed financially in a man's world. They sometimes used men sexually. They frequently achieved business successes that made them wealthy, and in using that wealth, they often exuded the strident consumerism and greed as good materialist, individualist attitudes associated with the Reagan era. Literary critics dismissed these glitzy books as frivolous and shallow, probably because they did not quite appreciate that these books were reflecting a significant change in the way women saw themselves in the world. And more simply, these critics did not appreciate the pleasure that millions of readers derived from these books. Critics were equally dismissive of the mostly female writers of these books. Women like Collins, Krantz, Shirley Conran, and Jilly Cooper, who changed the way women write and read about desire, ambition, sex, and relationships. Perhaps it was the high sales enjoyed by these women that really stung their critics. It is not hard to see why the book of Hollywood Wives was so successful. It combines a fast-moving plot with a peek into the private lives of Hollywood personalities. There is suspense, romance, some pretty wild sex scenes, and plenty of sharp and cynical humor. It exposes the misogyny and chauvinism of the entertainment industry and the double standards of powerful men, as its female characters set about turning the tables. Above all, the book is a biting social satire. Collins is a bit like a modern-day Jane Austen, but raunchier. The book certainly had all the ingredients for a blockbuster TV miniseries.
An ABC novel for television. Irwin Shaw's Rich Man, Poor Man.
From the mid-1970s, American television networks attracted vast viewing audiences with a new and popular form of drama, the miniseries. A cross between a TV movie and a series, miniseries were often described as novels for television. They were usually adapted from well-known books, and unlike an ongoing series, they had a predetermined ending. Miniseries themes spanned from historical epics to true crime stories, westerns to science fiction, family sagas to romantic melodramas. Audiences could not get enough of these big-budget programs in their heyday from the late 1970s to the mid-1980s. The TV networks often scheduled miniseries to air during the so-called sweeps weeks in February, May, and November, when ratings were used to calculate advertising prices for the upcoming period.
Dallas will continue.
The third ingredient in the Hollywood Wives recipe was the glossy nighttime soap operas that began with the immensely popular Dallas in 1977. They offered serialized storylines peppered with fantasy, escapism, intrigue, and romance. They also showed audiences how the other half lived. Many of the soap's larger-than-life characters were rich and powerful, living in luxury, running big businesses, and jet-setting around the world. These shows also celebrated money and consumerism. Glitzy fashions, expensive cars, and big houses were prominently shown. Even the characters of the more downscale, suburban-styled Knots Landing demonstrated an upwardly mobile trajectory through the mid-1980s, expanding out of the domestic setting into corporate boardrooms and sprawling ranches, with more glamorous costumes, more bed-hopping, and more outlandish plots. The public seemed fascinated by rich people in the 80s. Dallas and Dynasty battled for the #1 ratings spot from 1980 to 1985, and other popular shows like Heart to Heart and Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous also showcased the opulent lives of the rich. Meanwhile, the media made celebrities of real-life super-rich individuals by closely documenting their wealth, their business dealings, and their lavish lifestyles. Money and conspicuous consumption were favorably associated with success and achievement.
Scruples, the searing bestseller, is now a CBS movie spectacular starring Lindsay Wagner. She was a secretary until her marriage made her one of the richest widows in the world. Suddenly, she controlled an empire of high fashion and movie making. Her money could buy her anything except the man she wanted most, and it made her a target for blackmail and greed. Gavin MacLeod, Barry Bostwick, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., Connie Stevens, Robert Reed star in Scruples, Monday at 9, 8 Central. It's what can happen when your dreams come true.
With the miniseries Scruples in 1980, based on the book by Judith Krantz, these three elements came together to form a new genre, the female-centric melodramatic miniseries. Scruples was a short-form soap opera with a setting in fashion and movie-making. It was brazenly melodramatic, glamorous, escapist, and romantic, and it was clearly aimed at women viewers. Although the television censorship restrictions of the time meant that most of the sex was taken out of Krantz's famously sexual novel, Scruples was still successful and proved that there was a market for this type of miniseries, alongside the more serious historical epic dramas that were prevalent at the time. Scruples was followed by a string of female-centric melodramas, a remake of Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls in 1981, Bare Essence in 1982, Princess Daisy, Rage of Angels, and Return to Eden, all from 1983, Mistral's Daughter in 1984, and of course the wildly successful Lace, also in 1984. The success of these miniseries encouraged Aaron Spelling to buy the rights to Hollywood Wives. He told the New York Times that the book has a tremendous sense of humor. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It has almost a campiness to it. Spelling and his team set about turning that book into a glamorous, star-studded miniseries spectacular for the 1985 February sweeps.
All right, you tell me what to do. How do I go about seducing the great Neil Gray? You're a director, direct me.
No. I wouldn't direct anything that was this badly written.
Well, maybe we could get your wife to rewrite it.
Hollywood Wives will continue in a moment.
Before we go any further, let's try to summarize the key characters and sprawling plotline of Hollywood Wives. There are two key parallel narratives. The first involves identical twins who were separated at birth and illegally adopted, played in the miniseries by Andrew Stevens. Buddy, who is a Tom Cruise-type aspiring actor trying to get his big break, and also a former callboy, and Deke, a psychopathic killer from the Midwest, who is intent on tracking down the mother from Hollywood who gave him up for adoption years ago. Buddy and Deke each have no idea that they have a twin brother. Buddy is married to the beautiful and sweet-natured Angel, played by Catherine Mary Stewart. She is frustrated by his outdated ideas of marriage and wants to work to help support him. The second narrative involves the development of a hot new movie which all of the characters want to be involved with. We are never actually told what this movie, mysteriously titled Final Reunion, is all about, but supposedly the script is so good that it has career break and Oscar buzz written all over it. Anthony Hopkins plays Neil Gray, the talented but alcoholic wunderkid English director of the movie. Stephanie Powers plays Montana, his feisty wife and the writer of the movie. Rod Steiger is the obnoxious movie producer Oliver Eastern, while Joanna Cassidy plays Neil's ex-wife Marilee, who is still in love with him. But she also enjoys spending time with sexy toy boys, when she's not shopping or gossiping over lunch with her girlfriends. She is also the daughter of a former studio boss.
Gina Germain, ladies and gentlemen, the most beautiful, sensuous sex symbol in the United States today.
Suzanne Summers is Gina Germain, a conniving blonde bombshell known for cheesecake comedies who is desperate for a serious role in Neil and Montana's movie. She seduces Neil, videotapes their lovemaking, and blackmails him into giving her the part against Montana's wishes. Candice Bergen is Elaine, Marilee's best friend and wife of aging movie star Ross Conti, played by Steve Forrest, who is a deeply self-absorbed Paul Newman/Burt Reynolds type who traded on his matinee idol looks and is in denial about getting older. Elaine, who feels neglected by her husband and shoplifts from Rodeo Drive to make herself feel better, is determined to help Ross score a part in the hot new movie and revive his career, hoping that a comeback will also revive the romance in their marriage. Ross, meanwhile, is busy having an affair with Elaine's younger friend Karen, played by Mary Crosby, who is the daughter of emotionally distant semi-retired superstar George Lancaster, played by Robert Stack, a Gregory Peck/Henry Fonda type. Oliver Eastern wants bankable star Lancaster to come out of retirement and play the part that Ross Conti is pursuing in the hot new movie. Lancaster and Connie hate each other.
What should we toast to, Ross?
How about talent?
Fine, talent. For those who never had it.
Angie Dickinson plays super agent to the star's Sadie LaSalle, seemingly modeled on the legendary Sue Mengers. Sadie has a bad history with her former client and ex-lover Ross Conti. Despite her success, she still hungers for revenge after he dumped her when he became a star many years before. Roddy McDowall plays a swishy art dealer and part-time high-class pimp. One of the most interesting aspects of Hollywood Wives is its large and somewhat unexpected cast. Although Mary Crosby was known for her role on Dallas, most of the actors were not really associated with glossy melodrama. Most of them play their parts with a hard-edged, straight-faced seriousness, devoid of irony or wit. There are lots of dramatic close-ups and shocked expressions. Some of the actors do seem to relish hamming it up, especially Anthony Hopkins and Suzanne Summers, who bring a boisterous flair to their many sex scenes. A number of the actors had worked for Aaron Spelling on previous projects, including Joanna Cassidy, Angie Dickinson, Roddy McDowall, Stephanie Powers, and Robert Stack. Candice Bergen and Mary Crosby had both grown up in Hollywood themselves. Candice's mother, Frances Bergen, also appears in the miniseries, playing Mary Crosby's stepmother. Jackie Collins, who did not have any creative control over the miniseries, later told a newspaper that she thought the miniseries was totally miscast with 12 huge stars who were all wrong for their roles. Tantalizingly, she also told several media outlets that one of the actresses was playing herself without knowing it. Which one? We shall probably never know. Some of the actors in the miniseries do not bear much resemblance to the characters as written in Collins's novel. For example, Montana in the book is a 29-year-old independent free spirit with waist-length black hair and tiger eyes, a free-thinking nonconformist who is rather amused by the Hollywood scene. But she's played in the miniseries by then 44-year-old, sophisticated, and urbane redhead Stephanie Powers. The character's cynical wit and sense of fun are pretty much eradicated as well, although that is down to the script more than the casting. Another example is Sadie LaSalle. In the book, she is overweight and not conventionally attractive, although she is very sensual and has considerable sexual appetites. In the miniseries, she's played by the beautiful and sexy Angie Dickinson, but the character's love life is non-existent. But it was not only the characters that changed from the novel. There are also some notable narrative differences, as we will see in a moment.
Mrs. Conti.
Yes?
Hi, I'm Jerry, the new pool man.
Hi.
Your business manager said you needed service twice a week.
The pool needs service twice a week.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Say, do you use the pool a lot yourself, Mrs. Conti?
No. My husband's a swimmer. I'm not very good at it.
Well, I could teach you. I teach swimming to people all over town, and a lot of them are women.
Really? Anyone I might know?
Well, I don't like to mention names. Professional confidentiality. You know.
I know.
So listen, if you ever want to give it a try, just let me know, all right? I mean, swimming is easy. It's simply a question of holding your breath.
Well, don't hold yours.
A major challenge in making a TV adaptation of a money, sex, and power book in the 1980s was how to deal with all of the sex. Or more accurately, how to tone down the sex to satisfy the censors. The networks had internal censors who vetted and approved scripts and had a veto over the final cut of shows. They often demanded cuts to sex scenes, and they enforced rules forbidding nudity or profanity. These censors wanted to avoid possible complaints from churches, pressure groups, or the general public, but they especially wanted to avoid any problems with the advertisers. Judith Krantz, who had 6 of her books turned into miniseries, once told TV Guide magazine that, "My books are much sexier than the television versions. In terms of sex scenes, my readers get a great deal more than my viewers." Despite the promise in the advertising promos that Hollywood Wives would be quote-unquote shocking, most of the sex scenes are pretty tame. Think fish-mouthed kissing and partially clothed people rolling around in bed. Aaron Spelling assured the New York Times that the miniseries would provide racy fun, but added that, "There are graphic scenes in the book that we could never do on television," he said. "There's really nothing that explicit in the film. It's the kind of nudity seen through an opaque shower door. Sex is integral to this particular novel. The entire book can be read as a cynical attack on sexual double standards, as well as the sexism, ageism, and beauty standards in Hollywood at the time. So toning it down for television also tones down a lot of Jackie Collins' social commentary, and her humor too. One of the most memorable and infamous scenes in the book happens when Neil has a heart attack during drug and alcohol-fueled threesome with Gina and a prostitute. And that is just the start of the drama. We won't spoil what happens next for anyone who has not read the book, but suffice to say it is a lot more outrageous than anything that happens in the miniseries. Another interesting change to the text is the addition of a morality filter. In the TV version, when Neil has a heart attack in bed with Gina, it is clearly meant to be a moral punishment for his cheating on his wife. He expresses remorse as he clutches his chest. Neil in the book has such regret. He loves his wife, but he enjoys the thrill of cheating and does not feel bad about it. In the TV version, Elaine leaves Ross at the end, which is his moral punishment for cheating on her and taking her for granted. In the book, though, they end up together and happier than ever before, having both cheated on each other. These moralizing flourishes can be understood as part of what Professor David Thorburn described as the fantasy of moral reassurance that underpinned television melodrama in this period. It is a narrative convention or rule of melodrama that, in the end, sinners will repent and or be punished, good will triumph, evil will be vanquished, and true love will win. Of course, there are a lot of other changes to the book as well. We will summarize a few of them here. In addition to toning down the sex and adding that moral reassurance filter, we can also see that a number of these changes make the female characters less assertive and more passive than they were in the book. They come across as less sexual and less in control of their lives. In doing this, the script also tones down the commentary on misogyny, feminism, and double standards. In the book, most of the women characters come out on top in some way. Strong and successful on their own terms, Elaine, Sadie, Gina, Angel, and especially Montana. Even Marilee and Karen get happy endings. By contrast, at the end of the miniseries, most of the women are left emotionally adrift, with only Sadie getting some sort of closure. Elaine leaves Ross for an uncertain future. Karen reconciles with her father, but is pregnant to Ross and, inexplicably for this type of melodrama, there is never any kind of confrontation between Elaine and Karen. The fate of Buddy's evil twin remains unknown. Montana leaves Hollywood, but vows to return. And Gina simply disappears and is not seen again after Neil's death. Again, it seems odd to omit the dramatic potential of a confrontation with Montana. Part of the reason for so many unresolved endings is that Aaron Spelling wanted to keep options open to make a sequel miniseries. This leaves us with a somewhat unsatisfying ending dramatically, but it is particularly unsatisfying for the female characters. Most of them are just left hanging. Jackie Collins made an interesting observation about this to a British TV magazine. She said, "The script was written for television by a man, directed by a man, and produced by men. So the strength of women in the story was diminished."
Montana tells me you have a lot of promise.
That's nice to hear.
You're not married, are you?
Why? Does that matter?
Well, it's just a lot more complicated taking a married man with a wife and kids at home and making him into a sex symbol.
A sex symbol? No, I'm not married.
Good.
Hollywood Wives will continue in a moment.
In the book, there was a strong theme of female self-empowerment within an inherently sexist industry. That theme is totally absent from the miniseries, where the women mostly come off as victims. It really is the opposite of what Jackie Collins wrote about. But there are several other interesting themes we can read into the miniseries. About women who devote themselves to powerful men. About isolation and violence in contemporary America, specifically through the character of Deke. About the clash of art and commerce in the Hollywood machine. About the way that some people will voluntarily submit to a system that requires them to reinvent their image or make over their looks to attain success. And about the exploitative churn of creative talent and artistry by the movie-making industry. The ugly reality behind the dream factory facade. Perhaps the strongest themes in this deceptively light and frothy melodrama relate to the superficiality of an industry that is based on looks, youth, and box office, as well as the emotional emptiness that comes with achieving materialist definitions of success.
Gina, how do I say this? Straight teeth, good bones, and firm breasts don't make an actress, but they make a star. Don't be a snob. There's nothing wrong with being a sex symbol.
And how long do you think that's gonna last? This town is crawling with hard young bodies. They're all waiting to take my place someday.
Both of these situations are shown to destroy the possibility of meaningful relationships and human connection. In the world of Hollywood Wives, everything and everyone is disposable. You're only as hot as your last hit, and even an Oscar-buzzing movie with a brilliant script can be canned at the last minute and still break even on the insurance payout when the director dies.
Neil was like a brother to me. And now that he's gone, I'll have to renegotiate your contract.
Just as everything is disposable, so too everything is commodified. Art, bodies, sex, relationships, even people. It's a cynical and brutal portrait of the dream factory.
I don't want to. Look, I'm sorry. I really have to go.
What? What do you think the money's for?
Take it.
Hey!
On the surface, we are offered a fantasy of glittering wealth and indulgence. The characters are beautifully groomed, beautifully dressed, and beautifully lit. Women of leisure spend their time shopping with no concern for money. They have lovely houses and giant pools, go to lunch, plan and attend parties in couture gowns, and they get pampered in salons. Viewers are taken inside luxury boutiques to salivate over stunning clothes and amazing jewels. Aaron Spelling saw these upmarket settings and the sumptuous look of the miniseries as a key attraction for viewers, perhaps more so than the storyline or the stars. He told the New York Times, "Most of the audience has not been inside Ida Gray or Bijan or Gucci on Rodeo Drive. We show all of that. A lot of people will never get a chance to see great opulence. Those people need some escapism." On the one hand, the audience is served up glamorous lifestyles and conspicuous wealth. It is clearly intended as escapist fantasy, like Dynasty, and not as a realistic or gritty portrait of contemporary Hollywood. As TV critic Tom Shales observed, in this PG version of Hollywood, the worst vice that anyone has is alcoholism, and nobody has even heard of cocaine, which seems unrealistic for 1980s LA. But, on the other hand, when you analyze this content further, a different, darker picture emerges. Underneath the glossy veneer, Hollywood Wives exposes the underlying emptiness of affluence, the inherent narcissism of celebrity, and the isolating loneliness of people who live and work in a competitive, industry-based town. The women in Hollywood Wives are surrounded by all of the material pleasures they could want, but none of them are satisfied. In fact, they seem kind of bored, jaded with luxury, living in a gilded cage of extravagance, going through the motions of transactional relationships with people they don't like. They are searching for some kind of personal fulfillment or experience that money cannot buy. The lyrics to the theme song tell us they are spending their lives on Rodeo Drive, where love is something that money can't buy. This could be romantic love, self-love, career fulfillment, or just a sense of contentment. Whatever it is, it seems out of their reach.
Why are you doing this to me?
Oh, please, Neil, please don't make me do this. I'm desperate.
Several of the characters have unresolved traumatic experiences in their pasts, including Elaine, Sadie, Buddy, and of course, Deke, who suffers from an unspecified, untreated psychotic disorder. In terms of the quality of personal relationships in Hollywood, the miniseries paints a bleak picture. Ross is a narcissist who cheats on his wife. Elaine is a kleptomaniac masochist who feels neglected. Karen feels neglected by her father George, so she sleeps with daddy's substitute Ross and betrays her best friend. Neil is a lying, self-destructive addict who cheats on his wife. Montana is an uncompromising ice maiden. Marilee is obsessed with her ex. Sadie is obsessed with her ex. Buddy prevents his wife Angel from working and lies to her about his past. Gina uses sex and blackmail to progress her interests. Oliver uses everyone to progress his interests. He is the embodiment of the harsh Hollywood machine, unemotional, uncreative, and exploitative. In showing the development and eventual collapse of Montana's movie, we see how commerce can crush art. In the last scene of the miniseries, Oliver announces that, now that Montana's film has been canned, he will make another stereotypical Gina Germain popcorn comedy. This presents a harsh critique of the shallowness of the entertainment business. It is, after all, a business. The friendship between Elaine and Marilee is arguably the only authentic, respectful relationship in the miniseries. Although Buddy and Montana do develop a friendship, it is based on a power imbalance. Buddy and Angel do also seem to have repaired their marriage by the end of the miniseries, but it is tenuous. Almost everyone else is using each other, or else they are apathetic. Overall, the depiction of life in Hollywood and of the entertainment industry is quite dark, even if it does have a glossy exterior.
This is the girl from the beach. Her name is Angel.
Hello. Hi.
Is she perfect? She's absolutely perfect for the picture.
Yes, she's lovely.
What do you mean lovely? She's magnificent. She's a jewel. She's perfect for the picture.
No.
What'd she say?
I think she said no.
No? How can you say no to what I'm offering you?
I do understand. But I don't want to be in your film. I don't want to be in any film.
Nobody turns down the chance to be a movie star.
I do.
Oh, what's so funny?
There goes a girl who knows exactly what she wants. And she doesn't want us.
Now, wait a minute!
Hollywood Wives will continue in a moment.
When Hollywood Wives first aired, general critical reception was predictably negative. Television melodrama was not critically appreciated at the time, and this was reflected in the reviews. For example, critic Bill Kelly said, "In Hollywood Wives, as on Dynasty, the music swells and every character's jaw clenches at the vaguest threat of emotional crisis. No one laughs, unless it is to cackle sadistically at someone else's misfortune." Other critics appreciated the guilty pleasure appeal of the show. Howard Rosenberg of the Los Angeles Times said, "Hollywood Wives is refreshingly irrelevant, happily ignoring every critical issue of our time. This is a story about greed, lust, blackmail, treachery, and murder. TV's version of a compellingly bad B-movie, another glamorous rhinestone in the rough from Aaron Spelling. Hollywood Wives does leave you laughing." Actor Andrew Stevens made an interesting observation about the final cut of the miniseries. He told a newspaper that, "It is unfortunate that Hollywood Wives, limited by the restrictions of the television medium, couldn't be trashier. I think television has diluted and homogenized Jackie Collins's book." Stevens went on to become a very successful actor, in and producer of direct-to-video erotic thrillers in the 1990s. Whether the reviews were negative or qualifiedly positive, the critical consensus in 1985 was that Hollywood Wives was a glossy, trashy melodrama with no substance. In the years since then, it has been reappraised somewhat. It is now appreciated for its 80s nostalgic charm and camp sensibility. In their book Epic Television Miniseries, television historians John DeVito and Frank Tropia call Hollywood Wives full-scale televisual camp, an sadomasochistic wet dream of Hollywoodized self-laceration. Aside from enjoying its camp or ironic appeal, nostalgic viewers today also appreciate the show's 80s aesthetics, bright lighting, clear sound and diction, slower scenes with lingering close-ups, and the lavish use of background music. It is a contrast to how most contemporary television programs are presented. Looking back on its 40th anniversary, Hollywood Wives remains enjoyable on an ironic or camp level. But there is more to it than just frothy melodrama. The miniseries seems to cast a dazzling veil over the brutal entertainment industry, and then gives us a peek behind that veil. Yes, it shows us the glamour and excess, but it also offers a coded critique of money, power, consumerism, and the Hollywood machine. An interesting way to evaluate Hollywood Wives as a television product today is by looking at the character of Montana as a proxy for the novel's author, Jackie Collins. Montana was one of a series of strong, sexy, independent women characters who appeared in Collins's novels. These characters, from Fontaine in The Stud, to Dallas in Lovers and Gamblers, from Jade in Hollywood Husbands, to Lucky Santangelo in Chances and Other Books, clearly seem to be alter egos for the author. In both the book and the miniseries of Hollywood Wives, Montana/Jackie is an outsider who is amused and fascinated by Hollywood. In both the book and the miniseries, Montana develops a special story that everyone wants to monetize, but then she loses control of the project. In the book, Montana manages to regain control at the end, making her movie on her terms, and she also gets revenge on the Hollywood mogul who crossed her. But in the miniseries, it is left open as to what will happen to Montana or her movie. This seems to be not terribly different to what happened to Jackie Collins with the miniseries adaptation of Hollywood Wives. Though paid well for the rights, and agreeing to use her public image to cheerfully promote the miniseries around the world, Collins later reported that, while she was paid a fee to be a creative consultant, she was never consulted. She thought that the miniseries did not reflect the humorous and cynical tone of her book, and she disagreed with some of the casting choices. Like Montana, Jackie also lost control of her project. In real life, there was nothing that Jackie could do about the miniseries version of Hollywood Wives, but she did learn a lesson. She decided not to sell the miniseries rights to her 1986 book Hollywood Husbands to Aaron Spelling, although he was reported in the media as wanting to option it. She also declined to sell the rights to her books Chances and Lucky until a network would agree to give her creative control. That finally happened in 1990, when NBC agreed to let her write the teleplay, oversee casting, and executive produce the miniseries Lucky Chances, which was a ratings success. She also had the same level of control over the 1992 miniseries Lady Boss. More broadly, melodramatic miniseries continued after Hollywood Wives into the mid-1990s, but the popularity of the genre slowly declined. This coincided with the rise of reality-based programming. Glamour and escapist melodrama went out of fashion during the grittier, more realist 1990s, and changing pop culture tastes also saw the decline in popularity of the money, sex, and power book and the end of primetime soap operas. Although both forms make periodic comebacks, their heyday was certainly in the 1980s. But despite that, the influence of the melodramatic miniseries genre can be still seen today. Viewers have exhibited a revived fascination with glamour and wealth, as can be seen on reality shows like the Real Housewives franchise and the Kardashians. The shadow of Hollywood Wives and other melodramatic miniseries can also be seen in more recent melodramatic serials, although the tone and coding of melodrama has changed since the 1980s. Today, it is much more self-reflexive, socially conscious, and ironic. Looking back, an important element of the Hollywood Wives miniseries that we can't ignore is that the finished product demonstrates how difficult it was to make a television adaptation of a money, sex, and power, or bonkbuster book in the 1980s. Mainstream television standards were simply not in line with the books that they were adapting. We see the same watering down of mature content in other miniseries like Scruples, Lace, Sins, and I'll Take Manhattan. We also see it in the 1990s British television adaptations of Jilly Cooper's novels, Riders, and The Man Who Made Husbands Jealous. Interestingly, Cooper's 1988 novel Rivals was made into a miniseries by Disney Plus in 2024. It was presented as a 1980s period piece, showing all of the fashions, smoking, drinking, and casual sex that was associated with the era, but with enough tweaks to the narrative and themes to make it not only relevant as a contemporary melodrama, but to also offer a thoughtful critique of sexist, classist, racist, and homophobic attitudes. Audiences lapped it up, and a second series was commissioned. When we look at the success of Rivals, And when we consider the politics of Collins's novel Hollywood Wives in the context of a post-Me Too, post-Weinstein world, Collins's novel seems almost prophetic. With today's changed television production environment, it would be very interesting to see a remake of Hollywood Wives, as a period piece but unhindered by 1980s censorship. Viewers will always enjoy the fantastic 1985 miniseries version of Hollywood Wives for the glorious, glamorous time capsule that it is. But it is indisputably a relic of its era. The lack of diversity within its all-white cast also highlights it as a product of a different time. So, looking at the recent streaming success of Jilly Cooper's rivals, perhaps it is time for a new limited series version of Hollywood Wives, reinstating Collins's humor and socio-political commentary and adding in a post-Me Too lens. The story certainly seems as relevant today as ever. Maybe even more so.